that's where I see a huge wave of opportunity. And so entrepreneurship, I think, is this like untapped market.
This episode is sponsored by Southern Utah Safe and Vault. It's one-stop shop, buy, education, delivery, everything you need with the safe or a vault door. Website is safesfirst.com. Their showroom is 1397 West, Sunset Boulevard, number 115 in St. George, Utah. Phone number is 435-767-7878. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Derek Legg podcast. We are back in the vault today. I've kind of noticed one thing I don't do very well is introducing myself. I don't feel like I need to since it's the Derek Legg podcast, but I am your host, Derek Legg. This is episode 67. We've got another Pineview alum, 2007 Pineview alum here. I went to school with, known him middle school, probably when we first
somewhere in there.
Yeah. So this is Mitch Hancock. How's it going, man?
Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is cool. I love it when people like kind of reach out to us and say, hey, I could talk about this. I could have topics. I could have talking points, interesting conversations. And you know, it's happened maybe a dozen times or so over the 67 episodes we're in, but it's cool for me to be like, people want to not only support the podcast, but want to come on and have a voice on it too. So it's been a cool thing. So appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of cool to prove to people that we actually do bring in people that reach out. So, if you think you got a cool topic or just want to come on and tell your story, you know, hit us up on any of the social medias and we'll do everything we can to bring you on.
Sweet.
Anyway, man, let's kind of jump in. So we had a clip that we posted that you had commented, and that's kind of what sparked the interest of bringing you on. And we'll dive into it. I kind of want to go through a timeline on this. So, but it was talking about middle class and you as a licensed financial advisor. Is that the right way to put it?
Used to be.
No
longer hold financial licensure, but yeah.
Yeah. A previous, you kind of had some thoughts on it and you wanted to expound on just the short, 20-second clip that we put out there. So we're going to focus some time on that, but I want to get some of your background first so people don't think that we're just two knuckleheads on here talking about our opinions, right? Like we actually have some experience to back it up. So kind of give me maybe the last few years, whatever you feel is relevant, just some background on you, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah. So, where my career, grew up in family business. I've come from a family of entrepreneurs and it's awesome. So like small business runs in my blood. And where I feel like my career really started is when I broke out from family business, right? Because then I didn't feel like I was living under somebody's shadow or just the little brother.
What's the family business?
So my dad he used to run a farm and stuff like that, but now he just does greenhousing.
Oh, okay.
So out in Washington Fields, it's been out there for
cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's about a half mile south of Staley Farms, and he's been running the greenhouse out there since 1978 or something, 79, somewhere in there. So grew up in that business. And then my siblings have a kind of a spin-off company called Botanicals. And over the past few years, they've expanded that. It's super cool, to where they do, interior tropical plants and pottery. So like when you see like nice maintained real live plants in like office buildings or in high-end residential, chances are pretty good that they are the ones who like install those or maintain those. They've bought out some of the companies here in town that used to do that. And so
what an awesome like niche business.
It is.
That's cool.
It's fun. So I worked throughout high school. Like when you and I would have first met, that was my after school job, was like going around to different accounts and taking care of plants and so on and so forth. But anyway, fast forward, when I left that business when I was going to school at Dixie, and I got very clear, call it inspiration and impression, to go to BYU and transfer into this business strategy program. And I'm like, okay, like that's what I'm going to do. And when that happened, I needed to go find a new job, because at the time they were just operating here in Southern Utah. They've since expanded into Northern Utah, but at the time it was just Southern Utah. And so I was like, okay, I got to figure like, what am I going to do? And I didn't have my bachelor's degree yet. So I said, okay, what can I do to put food on the table for my family? Because my wife was pregnant with our first daughter. And since I didn't have that degree yet, I was like, hey, I've started to do a little bit. Like I sold a few accounts at St. George Airport, I think was my first like big contract. It was like a $40,000 contract. And I was like, maybe I could do this sales thing. And so I found sales and got into the door-to-door game. Was my first like full-time commission-only sales position. And that kind of kicked off my career of sales and marketing and entrepreneurship. So that's where that started. So did door-to-door for a season and then moved back to Southern Utah, dropped out of BYU, which that's another story. Maybe if we have time, we can get into that because that's kind of an interesting one. But then got into the car business, worked with the Wade organization here in town. Absolutely love Stephen Wade. Stand-up dude, has done so much for this community, and I have a ton of respect for him. And then from there, transitioned into financial services, and was primarily did insurance. And then my next phase, my next chapter in that was to get into the world of financial planning. So I became a registered investment advisor. And as I went deeper into that, at the same time, I was learning from my mentor, who I now work with. He's our founder and CEO of the company that I'm with now. He's somebody who had achieved financial freedom at the age of 28 and was a millionaire by 30.
Wow.
And what he was saying and what traditional financial advice was saying were two very different things. And so it was kind of like this bipolar experience, or like maybe if you've ever been like in a shower where like there's two shower heads, if you like have one that's hot and then the one that's cold, like it's not a fun experience. And you're like, which one is like, which path do I take? And as I learned more from him and understand it, like, okay, what actually helps people exit the middle class? What helps people to become rich? And how does money actually work? And it's very different than what is trained, taught, and educated in traditional financial planning. And I don't mean to throw any stones at anyone who's a financial planner. I think that's a great service, a noble profession, because is it better to help get somebody on a path to start saving and to be able to create wealth? Absolutely. I believe very strongly that like people have a moral obligation to get rich. Like that's not a bad thing. It's something that they should pursue. I've got a friend who his main slogan is "Get rich, give back." And if you don't pursue wealth, then you're not going to be able to grow or give at the same level that most people want to give. And oftentimes I think that people who say that like money isn't important, then why do you spend all of your freaking time working for money if money is not important? Like, let's just have a real, raw, honest conversation that money is actually important and that money matters. And, then like, let's pursue it. Like, let's get rich. Let's be able to give back. Let's be able to, make an impact and make a difference. So, with learning from my mentor, his name's Brandon, he had worked with Kiyosaki, Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He had been mentored by and worked with him closely, and they don't see like eye to eye on everything. I don't know, like there's things that I disagree with some of the things that Brandon brought up. What my mentor Brandon did was that he saw what Kiyosaki was doing with the cash flow quadrant, right? The ASBI, right? I've got to look at the image, right? And he said, well, that's a cool way to look at the tax code, because that's really what Robert Kiyosaki was doing in, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He's like codifying, giving an image behind like how the tax code actually works. But what Brandon did was he kind of evolved that concept of saying, well, what's the mindset behind that? What's the human psychology behind that? And that's where he came up with the prosperity quadrant, to where it has roots there in Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, but it actually addresses the human psychology behind what makes someone become rich and abundant. Because a lot of times people say that they want to be rich, that they want to make a bunch of money. And some people do, but they may do so at the expense of the stuff that's actually important to them. they may do so at the expense of their family or their health or their mental health, especially these days. Like sometimes I get way super far out of balance, and that if you can understand the psychology behind that and the human behavior, then you can, in a predictable way, start to exit the middle class, because each one of these areas it's like a world that has a gravitational effect. And if you understand like what's the parameters, what's the gravity that's holding somebody stuck in their financial situation, then you know what you're up against, instead of trying to fight this invisible force of like, well, I want to get out of poverty. And like understanding some of those things is, I think, key to being able to break out and create the type of life or finances that you want. So I'm not a tattoo guy, no disrespect to anybody who is, but like if I was to get a tattoo, it would freaking be of the prosperity quadrant, which, anyway, sorry for slapping the mic. I don't know, maybe we can throw a visual up or something on the podcast of what that looks like, but it gives people an idea of how to predictably go forward.
So we've done some clips on, and it's usually a solo one that I'll do, and it just talks about, and that's what kind of queued you up to bring you on, was just exiting middle class. And I'm blown away at like the comments we got on it. Like I thought everyone was trying to like put focus and energy into making money and becoming wealthy and like I thought everyone's goal was to be financially independent, or whatever word you want to put to it, financially free. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's like a Southern Utah bubble. I mean, I don't know, because a lot of people that I talk to, and you know, my 5 people I'm influenced by, right? Like people I'm around in the podcast, a lot of the people we've brought on, like that's what we're talking about. And then when I put that little clip out there were so many people that were like, you know, worshiping the dollar, chasing the dollar, how, not even like how it's evil, you know, to be rich. And like someone even said, why is it expected that I become rich, or something like that? Like, why are people putting so much energy into this? And I was not expecting like that feedback. Right. So like exiting the middle class, and we had Jeff Fieldstead on here, and I need to go quote it, and maybe I can get Mallory to kind of put it as a post, but he said something like middle class is where ambition goes to die. It was something like that. And it hit me, and I was like, that's so true. And so maybe that's what it is. Like these people have just been, I mean, first of all, I believe in the last 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, we've lived in this, you know, endless supply of money. Yeah. Like we've lived in a very high economy. We've lived in, you know, and I'm sure there are people that haven't, but in general, you know, the US has, and we've enjoyed all of this abundance. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what's coming up around the corner right now, you know, on how that gets affected. But I think that's part of it, is people haven't had to work as hard because there's so much money out there in the economy. Does that make sense?
Well, especially within the past few years, right? When the government started printing money like crazy. So I may have my facts a little bit off, but I believe that in 2020, or it was maybe from 2020 to 2021, when the government started printing money, that in that year period, that they a fifth of the entire like money supply in the United States. Like, so if you go back to Founding Fathers days and start adding up all of the money that has ever been printed, ever been created, 1/5 of that was printed from 2020 to 2021.
And that's bananas.
That is absolutely bananas, to where, you know, because however, I don't do math in my head, but like hundreds of years, right, of like we're printing money, creating money, and 1/5 of it came in 1 year.
Right.
Like, why are we looking at inflation? Why is like prices of this going up and used cars prices are going down, and like food, like there is so much chaos and craziness. It's not even funny. So yeah, there's going to be some interesting economic times ahead, and the people who are willing to understand and put in the time, energy, and effort of learning how money actually works, learning what people actually do who are rich and abundant in their life, those are going to be people who thrive, and then everyone else it's going to be freaking take a bath and lose their shirts
right.
in what they're doing, because they don't understand the fundamental principles of how money works and how it flows and how it operates.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at this, and I'm going to get us off track for a second, but I promise I'll bring us back. There's a story about, and I'm sure I saw this on a social media thing, and I'll put this in a nutshell, right? There was a dad that wanted to support his family, so he started, I think it was a hot dog vending, like sidewalk vending, and he started doing that. He was growing it really well. Ended up with 2 of them, 4 locations, started franchising it. And the whole basis was to be able to make enough money to send his kid to college. So he ends up making all this money and he sends his kid to Harvard. And then the kid goes to Harvard, gets educated, gets everything. And this isn't like a knock on college, which I have a huge knock on. So I'm not going there with it.
Yeah. We can. I'm happy to have that conversation.
But in college, they're teaching him about, how student debt affects you, how going into a recession affects you and all this stuff. And so he comes back to his dad's, hot dog cart and he sees that his dad's using the most expensive hot dogs he could buy, the most expensive buns he could buy, most expensive condiments he could buy. And he's like, Dad, we're in a recession. Like, you've got to cut back on some of this stuff. And so the dad, goes and gets cheaper hot dogs, gets cheaper buns, gets cheaper everything, and sends that out to all of his franchises. Well, then people don't keep going to him, right? And so it starts falling down, and everyone's asking him, why are you changing all these things? And he's like, guys, we're in a recession. And so it like starts backing off the whole business, right? And then he ends up losing the whole business. I mean, and this is like a 10-minute story. I'm wrapping into 30 seconds, but so there's that way to, once they get the mindset of a recession, everything starts getting pulled back, everyone gets conservative, and everything falls apart, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like that way to think about it, and that's what's happening right now, right? But for me, I'm like, well, so is that the way to think about it? Because we have a retail business and we have like a resale business, and the retail business, we've seen it slowing down a little bit, which it typically does in the summer. Gun sales, the gun industry slows down in the summer a little bit. Retail typically slows down in the summer. And so I've still been buying my regular stuff. And over the last 2 years, I had products I couldn't get for 2 years. And so I don't turn anything down now. And I have distributors that are calling me because someone else will turn a truck down. And I'm like, no, send it down here. And so now I have like a bunch of back stock. So I'm wondering, we're still playing that out to see if it was a good idea or not. But I'm not letting it like scare me that we're going into a recession. And that's just like a little story to kind of put where my mindset is. But at the same time, like, can you recognize that there is a recession coming? I think so. The other thought process is, like, we're still living, there's still money out there. There's still people spending money. There's still a lot of money changing hands, and I'm trying to get a part of that. Mm-hmm. And so, and this is just my thoughts, right? Of the last couple of weeks running multiple business about, so our resale business, we buy from box stores, right? Okay. So Target, Costco, whatever. And they're doing more inventory blowouts.
Yeah. And so, inventory.
Yeah. So most of the stuff we would get, like AB is how they would do the condition, right? Is AB products or like new.
And what type of products are they? Like
anything.
Anything. Yeah. Clothes, appliances, anything.
Yep. Okay. So we just bought 2 semis of appliances. We got furniture. We've got electronics, bunch of Beats headphones, like a bunch of stuff like that. But the amount of auctions that are shelf pulls is, I don't know the exact number, 5 times what it used to be. And so I'm like, and a lot of it's like, surprisingly, I don't know why, a lot of it's Target, but there's a ton of shelf pulls. And so my mom and I, who helps me run the resale business, we've been sitting down and kind of just going over numbers, going over the amount of sales, amount of dollars, and she's telling me, like, we got to get on some of these, shelf pull stuff, because that's all brand new. I don't have to check them. I don't have to clean them. I don't have to, we can just put them up for sale. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, we should buy that. But is there a reason why they're doing this? Like, are they smart? Obviously, they're smarter than us. I'm not Target, right? Yeah. I'm not Costco. But it's that same thing. I have this like teeter-totter of like how I'm supposed to be feeling about this. Should I still be abundant on it and trying to push money and make money and have the most products available and have or should we be drawing everything back?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, you have thoughts on that?
I totally do.
Just curious.
So when you look at market cycles, that economic downturns is oftentimes when the middle class loses all of this money, and where does it go? It goes into the hands of the rich. And it's because the middle class are disconnected from their money. They don't understand how money works. They're consumers. Generally, those people who are rich are producers. They have something that they produce in terms of value. And so the middle class does this like clench and pucker maneuver of like, oh, got to rein it in. But what the rich understand is that there is value to be created. Like you can study even in the stock market, some of the strongest traders or investors were like freaking forged in the fire in economic downturns. Whether you're looking at Ray Dalio or who's the guy who owns Robinhood, Tony Robbins' homie. I can't think of his name right now.
I don't know. Ray Dalio's first person. Okay.
Paul Tudor Jones. And then there's another guy that Tony Robbins often references who was like one of the first stock market billionaires back in the turn of the century. But anyway, fortunes can be created in economic downturns. But the people who lose their shirts in economic downturns are the people who get over leveraged. They're the people who don't know how to pivot from their current business model. And one thing that my mentor Brandon taught me was that in times of economic downturn, people get hungry to learn. And so, like, let's say in your safe business or your resale business, that maybe your sales are going to slow down. And I'm no fortune teller. I can't tell you for sure, but my guess is that there's probably going to be some level of slowdown. So I wouldn't like totally pucker up and be like, no, we're going out of business and all this crap. But I would, it's time for prudence, time to be wise, but also look at what's the opportunity. Because what my friend and mentor Brandon taught me is that in economic downturn, people get hungry for education. And you see college tuition, like people will start going back to school. People will start going back to college to relearn a skill, retool, and so that they can learn how to make money in a new way. Maybe they're in like a manual labor trade. They're in construction or whatever. And like here in Southern Utah, like construction is a huge part of the economic machine. And so if like construction dries up, there's going to be a lot of people here that are like, oh crap. I don't have a job, or I'm not able to get the kind of work that I usually would get. And so a lot of people are going to go back to school. So if in your business, you can add in an education component, and that may look like an info product sort of a thing, info product business, to where you can say, hey, times are tough. You want to learn the best practices that help me scale my business from, 6 figures or from, 5 figures to 6 figures, or like if you can train people with your knowledge, there is huge market upside in a downturned economy because people are humble, they're teachable, they're hungry to learn, and money will flow in that segment of the market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel recently, and maybe it's because I'm more involved with them in the last 2 years, but I mean, I've signed up for 3 different coaching things, and I feel like they're popping up everywhere. and so maybe that's why. I've even had a couple people offer for me to come in on it and be like a coach in some things with business. And I'm like, I wish I could. 'Cause I mean, a lot of what I do is like, I like helping people. I mean, that's the whole point of the podcast. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, yeah, dude, if I could get in and teach someone how to do something and, in turn be taught by them as well. But, so it's a little bit of a selfish thing, but I'm like, I just don't have time for it. I wish I did. And that's one of my goals in the future, to have time for something like that. But that's interesting that you say that, because it's been in my mind a lot, because I've had a lot of conversations about it. And like, I just signed up with a real estate investing school recently. But I mean, I didn't think I was doing it because there's a downturn. But maybe that's just a byproduct of me not even realizing it, is getting into something like that. I mean, I do see opportunity, like your mentor saying, I see a lot of opportunity in markets right now. I'm just wondering like where it gets cut off, right? Like people are still going out and buying $6 coffees.
Yeah.
People are still buying $150 headphones. I know, because we're selling them every day right now.
Yeah.
People are still buying those things. And so it makes me wonder, and I think, dude, we're at a different point than we've ever been to. The way social media works, the way the rich own a lot more things than the banks used to, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be a larger separation between the rich and the lower class. I think the middle class is going to, and I'm no strategist, right? This is just a barely graduated high school kid talking to you here, so take it with, a grain of salt. But I feel like it's going to kind of deplete. I think the middle class is going to get smaller, and more people are going to go into the wealthy, and people are going to go into the lower class, and 100%. It's going to shrink that a lot more. And so that's where I've gotten into some of these coaching things, thinking, okay, what do I not know? What can I learn? What can I? So I guess I hadn't put it that way, but that's exactly what it is I see opportunity in the market.
Yeah. Well, there's at any time in any market cycle, there is two worlds exist. The world of abundance and, prosperity and like all of those things, but there's also the world of scarcity. And so these two worlds, scarcity and abundance, coexist at the same time, and we get to choose where are we going to place our focus on. So during COVID lockdown, right, people made boatloads of money in COVID lockdown, and what I do with some of my real estate, that is I doubled my money on like one of the properties. Like that did not hurt my feelings in any way, shape, or form, right? But then there's so much like scarcity that's pumped through on the media of like, oh no, it's this scary time and like stay inside, and like just who are we going to listen to? Because our inputs are going to equal the outputs of our life. So what I mean by that is like if we're listening to the news, if we're listening to the sources of scarcity, then we're going to do the pucker maneuver and the shrink. But who are we in proximity to? Who are the creators? Who are the producers? And so both can exist. In any market cycle, you're going to experience things where you may get your butt handed to you a couple of times. But again, some of the strongest companies that exist today were born in the middle of the Great Depression, or they were born in other market downturns. And they were born because if they could survive in that environment, then they can freaking thrive in prosperous times, right?
Yeah, so, it makes sense.
So yeah.
Huh. Here you are, dude, diagnosing everything I've been thinking of in a couple minutes. So let's jump back where we were kind of going with all that before I derail this. So we kind of just went through background. Let's talk about, because I think this will be the bulk of it. Let's talk about kind of, I don't know if graduating is the right word, but moving out of middle class and trying to get into upper class wealth, generational wealth, whatever level you want to talk about. And I think that comes in levels. I think that people, at least it did for me, like, it's the high school just make six figures thing, right? And then it's like, okay, we're doing six figures. Like, now what, right? And so then my wife hates me every time I talk about but she does six figures alone. And so whatever I'm doing, I'm like, cool, we're already past six figures. Mm-hmm. And so then I had to shift my mindset to what's past that? Okay, it's growing a business. It's growing something that can be sustained. And I'm still working on that. And it's growing a business that I can either one day step away from and or sell. That was kind of the goal. And then now we have a 2-year-old. So over the last 2 years, my thing's been, okay, it's just been a hard shift to we're pretty much good, like my wife and I, right? And so what can we do to help set him up? Mm-hmm. And I've got a lot of bad feedback on this too, that I just don't understand. I'm like, well, wouldn't you want to put your kids in a better place? But I think people have a disconnect of, I'm not trying to raise a spoiled brat. Totally. But putting a kid in a better position to be financially set for the rest of his life and help him get his kids set. Mm-hmm. And then that's what generational is for me, right? That's just breaking it down. And I've had so many people, and I think it's just the temperature of the society right now, but I've had so many people come in negative talk when I talk about this. Good. And I just don't understand it. I'm like, dude, you need to go ahead.
Well, it's the, there's the mainstream socially approved narrative that can happen. And then there's like wild batshit crazy over here where people are just like, doing wild things. And when you start to break away from what that mainstream is, you go a few deviations away from that, people start freaking out because you're challenging their entire belief systems. And if you're challenging their belief systems, you're challenging their identity. You're creating this cognitive dissonance where, like, there's been studies done that cognitive dissonance is physically painful for people. And so when they get in this state of cognitive dissonance, they just want to do whatever the crap they can to get out of that. And so that may manifest itself by, like, you're triggering people, but that's not a bad thing. Like, I mean, I think that people like Howard Stern, for example, that are just doing this like shock jock sort of stuff just to get a reaction out of people, or I think that's BS. And like the vast majority of news is BS because it's literally
clickbait.
It's literally just written to get a emotional response so that they can sell advertising and keep people on their site. But like, if you are stepping outside of the mainstream for the purpose, for the intent to help educate and train and teach and like serve people, you're going to get some heat. And that's par for the course. And that's probably an indicator that you're doing something right. Not an indicator that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So there's been times where, like, I generally don't get nervous when I am in a situation like this, or whether I'm about to speak on stage. It's pretty rare that I get nervous anymore, just because I've put in the time. But when I do get nervous, it's usually when I'm about to address something that's like a spicy topic, something that's going to piss people off. And that's where I'll start to kind of get the butterflies. I'm like, oh, I'm going to catch some heat for this. And I have to kind of catch myself of like, all right, am I like, what's my intent here? Is my intent to serve? Is my intent to help? Is my intent to train and educate? Yeah. Okay, then cool. I'm going to step into it despite the nervousness, despite, anything that I may be feeling. And I have yet to have an experience where somebody could like actually had a leg to stand on. If I triggered somebody, they generally don't, like, once we talk through it, they're like, oh, I just saw it a different way. And like, I've yet to have a situation where somebody was like, screw you, like, I hate you forever. And
I guess that's the difference between messaging someone on Facebook and and having a live interaction with someone.
Yeah.
But let's get spicy, man. Let's talk about middle class, what you're taught, what you're trained, what you're told from school, what you're told from your 9 to 5. And I would imagine what the majority of people are doing or have done. And if you want to start 401k, if you want to start investing, if you want to start wherever you want to start, man, I'll let you kind of guide us, and then we'll hit rabbit holes, I'm sure.
Okay. This is going to be good. So at the outset, here's my disclaimer for all of this. I have some dear and great friends in the financial services industry. And after this podcast, maybe I won't have those same friends in the financial services industry because, I've spoken at a few events on this topic, but that's cumulatively a couple thousand people that I've addressed. But in financial services, you're doing a great service, because if someone, like, most of the time, what financial services is doing is they're getting somebody started in a pattern of saving money and creating wealth. So I have a lot of stones to throw at what Dave Ramsey does, but I cannot argue with the man he's been a great force for good in the marketplace. And I view Dave Ramsey as someone who is like the Alcoholics Anonymous for people who just can't handle consumer debt. Like, you put a credit card and they're going to like start salivating and be like, all right, let's like load that thing up. Let's max it out. Dave Ramsey is perfect for that person who doesn't have the financial self-control to not just, go in debt like crazy. And that's kind of like getting them out of a negative situation to a neutral situation. But then when you think about Dave Ramsey, any advice that he gives around wealth creation, first off, if he held financial licensure, it would be revoked like that, because he gives this blanket financial advice of that everyone should invest in these mystical, magical mutual funds that are going to generate 12% every single year, and then it's going to beat the market, and just buy term and invest the difference, and like all of this stuff. It's like, bro, like, that is not good financial advice for everyone. Is it like, okay? Yeah, like it can be okay to get somebody starting investing. But what I believe that Dave Ramsey does is he keeps the middle class. And he has financial interest in keeping the middle class, because some of the stuff that he sells and some of the stuff that he teaches, such as like buy term and invest the difference, bro freaking owns a life insurance or has shares in a life insurance company, right? And so of course he's going to be like, no, permanent life insurance, you shouldn't do that because it's this. And he has financial interest. So that's like one thing, right? But again, Dave does some great good in the world, but you just got to know who you're listening to and what type of outcome you're going to get, depending on the mentor that you're listening to. And I learned this early on in my career. I wanted to get good at sales. And so I started listening to these people who were good at sales and they had made millions of dollars. And I started following their path, following their ideology. But what I didn't realize was that as I started to get some of the results of the financial results, I was also getting their other kind of results that I didn't realize, the things that were behind the curtain, underneath the surface, such as their approach to maybe going after business or selling. They were so hardcore that they were totally neglecting their relationships. They were totally neglecting their family. And maybe they, had this wake of broken relationships. And I found myself in a situation with my wife to where I was going down that same sort of path. And I started looking around at my environment and I'm like, oh my gosh, let me look at this person who's maybe 5 years ahead of me in my current career path. And I think I had this awakening when I was in the car business. I started looking at some of those people, great people, but they didn't have the type of family life that I wanted. And I had to have this gut check of if I keep going in this path that I'm going, and this isn't you can do the car business and you can have a great life, but the mentors that I was following, the people that I was listening to, I was going to get all of their results. I couldn't just single out the financial results because the way that they were pursuing the financial results was this all or nothing. I'm going to ignore my family. I'm going to be here from bell to bell. I'm going to do it and they always said, well, yeah, if you put in your hard work for 5 years and work bell to bell, then you'll be able to take your foot off the gas. Then I'm like, well, how come you're 20 years in and you're still working bell to bell?
Exactly.
Right? You haven't figured it out yet. So if you're going to invest in a mentor or a coach or somebody, you better be willing to get all of their results, not just some of their results. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but so we talked Dave Ramsey, talked a little bit about that. So when we think about 401ks, I think that financial advisors are doing a good service to create people who are starting to save for the purpose of investing. But where I have a huge disconnect is one, look at where the vast majority of money is made. When I got my financial licensure and my securities licenses, as I started to learn more about it, you take a mutual fund, for example, or really just about any sort of fund. They have this thing called the pass-through principle. And this was probably one of the things where it just, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is crazy. To where someone's managing your money, they've got this mutual fund, this whatever it is, they're managing your money. And this pass-through principle is that, they may take your money, invest it, and let's say that they make 30% in investment on that. They can basically write off some of their business expenses and effectively, and I'm technically probably not saying this exactly right, so there's people who can correct me in the comments, but they're effectively lowering your rate of return because they got business overhead that they've got to pay for. And so maybe your return went from, 30% down to 20%, which people would be in love over the moon if they could get 30%, right? But there's the pass-through principle. And that's just taking money right off the top. But then there's your financial fees on top of that, to where you're going to pay, anywhere from, if someone's a fee-based, let's say that it's 1%, right? And it's only 1% of your money. But if you look at the cumulative effect of that money management fee over time, that is going to chew up anywhere from 20 to 40 to 60% of your nest egg over the years just by that 1%. And this is where the financial services industry, again, I don't think that financial advisors are bad. They're not evil. Like I said, I've got dear friends in this and they're providing a valuable service. But generally, I don't know anyone who is super, super wealthy who's I got here by my 401k. I got here by my Roth IRA. I know some people who retired semi-comfortably with that, but I don't know anyone who's on track to retire comfortably with their 401k unless they are putting gobs and gobs and gobs of money into their 401k. Because once you start backing out the fees, once you start factoring in inflation, you're going to basically be at a break-even point. And in Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game, he does a great job at outlining the impact of fees. And like he throws all these rocks, and then like to this point where we're like, oh, screw mutual funds. But then he's basically like, yeah, like just have us manage your money, me and my partners, to where he's like pissing people off and getting them like unsold on this, but then selling people over here. And tons of respect to Tony. I love the impact. Like, dude has transformed and changed my life. But like, again, like he's got financial interest for people to put their money over there. Right. So I think that one of my key things is that the traditional approach to investing, one, it generally doesn't create super wealthy people. Like, it might make you kind of rich, or you might be able to retire off of it, but you're not going to get like wealthy.
I mean, so when you say wealthy, I mean, what dollar amount are you talking when you say wealthy? I mean, because if someone retires, I mean, is that a millionaire? Like, do they have it? Well, and then I'm always like, define a millionaire. Like, is that liquid $1 million in your bank account?
So that's the most probably typical definition of a millionaire. Yeah. But like, I think about wealth in terms of time, of how much. So you're talking about building a business that you can step away from. Like that's somebody who's like wealthy, is that they have time freedom. You can be rich, and you're married to your job, and you're married to like your thing, and you can have a lot of money coming in, and like you're rich, but I wouldn't say you're wealthy. And so maybe that's just my personal definition, is that like wealth is generally more measured in time. And when you think about the 1% or the super wealthy, they just have these business assets that are just freaking rolling cash, and then their kids have the trust fund and all that stuff. Like those are like, that's wealth.
Okay.
So that's how I define it. But let's talk amounts for retirement. So it used to be the 4% rule, to where as long as you didn't pull out more than 4%, like basically you could live off the interest of whatever your investment is. And as long as you don't pull out more than 4% of your nest egg each year, then it's basically your nest egg is going to keep growing and keep growing and keep growing. But given recent economic times, the 4% rule is dead, and you can maybe call it the 2% rule. And so when you start doing the math on 2%, how many millions do you need to have to be able to live off of that, right? To be able to generate an income of, 60, 70, 80, 90, $100,000, right? You're going to have like bare bones minimum. You're going to have have $2.5 million in retirement. And that's going to provide a crappy retirement. Like, that's not going to be like the retirement of your dreams, where you're buying the RV or you're buying the second house. Like, you're going to have to make $5, $6, $7, $8 million to be able to follow the traditional financial advice route. Whereas, so you take that sort of, and like, here's the other thing that bugs the crap out of me about traditional financial advice. You don't know if it works until the end. You could go 30, 40 years doing everything right. You're consistent Mr. Saver. You're putting the money in, like you're dedicated, you're scrimping and saving, you're living on ramen noodles, you're doing like whatever the thing is. You could put all of that in and do that for 30 or 40 years, check all of the boxes. And then the year before retirement, 2008 could happen again. And you just lost half of your life savings.
Yeah.
40% of your life savings. And so that's why I say, like, the traditional approach to financial advising, it's so freaking risky, is because you are gambling until the end.
Sure.
And so that's where assets like real estate, business, permanent life insurance, those kinds of things create, and I don't have any financial interest. Like, I'm not trying to sell you a real estate course. I'm not licensed in insurance anymore. Even I'm just talking about what I personally do. And like that's what the truly rich and the truly wealthy do, is they own business, they own real estate, they utilize permanent life insurance, to build up cash value. And because you can use your money in two ways at the same time. It's a powerful thing. But, anyway, I feel like I'm down in a rabbit hole now. So.
No, I've had that thought too, where, I mean, so my wife and I, like our work life couldn't be more opposite. Like she's well, I wouldn't say she's 9 to 5 so she's trauma orthopedics is what she does. So they're the, car accident in the middle of the night, needs surgery. Like that's what they do. So she's not necessarily 9 to 5, but she kind of is. And then she's 401k, she's retirement packages. She's, it's slipping my mind. With IHC, when you work there a certain amount of time, you get whatever it is, you get benefits. Like they have a word for it. Anyway, so she's all that. And so I've always been like, well, you build all of that, because if everything I have falls apart, like at least we still have something to fall back on, right? Like we actually just signed closing documents last night on on an investment property, our second investment property.
Good work.
She's like, well, I hope all this works out. And I'm like, dude, me too. And I'm like, well, we're up to different, we're very diversified in everything we're doing. Like she has a very needed occupation. Totally. She has her master's in nursing. Her job's pretty set. No matter where we go, she could get a job. Right.
Yeah.
With my businesses, I've got, post office stuff. I've got retail stuff. We have a couple different contracts. We're into real estate now. We're into short-term rentals. And so I'm like, if one falls, like we should be okay with everything else. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like she kind of takes the traditional route that you're taught. And then I have the other side of it of how I believe it should be done. Because I've always thought, the money that you're going to put in a 401k, the money you're going to do with all of that, well, let me have it and let me go put it into something else. And I kind of set it up that way on purpose. Again, so if I'm wrong, then we still have something, right? But it's interesting because like I've not been taught any of this. Like I'm not licensed in anything. It's just kind of things that I've seen and people I've talked to. And I've always thought like if there's, like I used to tell people, if there's $10 left on the planet, I'm going to make 7 of them. Like I'm going to figure out how to do it, and being in different, like I said, diversifying in different businesses, jobs, incomes. I mean, we're up to, I think this last one we just closed on is like our 9th stream of income. And so,
that's awesome.
And I'm not like pat myself on the back here. I'm just saying,
dude,
like there's different ways to do it is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think that like the financial advisor part, like you're saying, I think there's some positives to it if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have time, if you don't, whatever your excuse is, or you're just naive to it. There are people out there that are set aside to help you. Now they're going to pick up some crumbs along the way or pieces. And so yeah, I think there's different ways to do it, and not everyone's built to do it like you and I, like not everyone's built to do it that way. And so, and that's why that service exists. That's why that occupation exists, is because of that. If I spurred something, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that, with what's trained, taught, and educated with traditional financial advice is that the financial services industry, especially on the investment side, is intentionally complex so that they can have a job.
Yeah.
And the subtle undertones of what they're saying is, Derek, you're not smart enough to manage your money. Let me do it, because it's super complex. And it freaking is.
Right.
Like it is wildly complex. But you look at the learning curve of if somebody gets a good mentor or reads some good books on understanding how to invest in real estate, you can take that same sort of money that you're setting aside, you start putting that into real estate, and the wealth that you can create is exponentially more. Because what are the 2 ways that you make money in traditional like stock market? You make money with appreciation, meaning stock goes up, right? And then maybe if it's a dividend paying stock, like those are the primary ways that you're going to make money, right? If you buy and hold. But when you look at real estate, there's, depending on how you want to look at it, there's anywhere from 4 to 5 ways that you can make money in real estate. You can make money in real estate if you know how to buy right. Then you can pick up equity at the front end. You're let's say you're good at negotiating, or you know how to like target certain distressed properties, or you have a good way of going about it. Like you can pick up thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, or if you're in bigger real estate deals, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? On the front end. But you also have your cash flow. And the thing that financial advisors always like to throw rocks at with real estate is they say, well, over the past 100 years, real estate has only made on average, 6% of appreciation. And it's like, yeah, on average, that's the case, but that is 1 out of 5 ways that you can make money. You're also going to get the tax write-offs and the depreciation that you get to, take advantage of. The point is that there's multiple ways to make money with real estate, whereas in the stock market, you've got appreciation and maybe a dividend. And in real estate, your cash flow is like the dividend. And so it's just a bigger picture in what you can do to create for wealth, or to be able to create wealth. And anyway, so that is some of my thoughts.
Let me ask you this, just from your experience and your knowledge, if someone's going to get into something, I would think in my mind, you got to understand what you're doing 100%. And you got to be good at it, but you don't even have to be good at it, but you have to understand what you're doing. I think real estate's like the number one thing again, I'm no advisor and I'm figuring it out right now, I think real estate's the number one thing to get into.
Absolutely. It's like the shortest learning curve. And again, you compare it to the financial markets, like the people, is there crap loads of money made in financial markets? Absolutely. But like you're literally competing against like AI and robots and algorithms to like trying to beat the market. You're not going to beat the market. Like, I'm sorry, you might get lucky, but like you've got to create, day trading. Like that's got to be like your full-time thing to be able to be good at it. Right. But the wealth that people can create in the pockets of their time with real estate, the learning curve is so freaking short to where if you understand some of the principles, man, it's amazing. Now there's a million ways to do real estate wrong, just like there's a million ways to do the stock market wrong. But man, it's a short learning curve. So you get somebody, get a mentor, read the books, but get somebody who's got a proven track record, somebody who knows how to, create wealth in that arena. Buy their course, buy their program, buy the thing so that you can become educated in how to go about doing it.
Yeah. I had that conversation with someone. They were saying they had I think it was 10 grand. I've got 10 grand. I want to get into something.
Love that question.
And they're asking me, right? And I'm like, dude, I'm still trying to figure this out. Like, I'm not sure that I'm the guy to ask, but what I told them was, dude, if you got 10 grand, like you probably can't go buy a house. You could probably go buy some crypto and lose it in a week. You could probably get into some safe stocks because everything's down right now. And if you're okay to buy and hold for years and years, like you could probably make some money on that. But then I said, dude, what you could probably do is go find a course for 5 or 10 grand. And I mean, if you got 100 grand, then yeah, I think we got some options. If you have 6 to 10, probably go find out what you want to get into, what sparks your interest. And my mind's firing every single way. And I think that's why I get me and my wife into all these little niche things, but find something that sparks your interest, something you can be interested in. And for me, everything becomes a part-time job. Like I have 6 part-time jobs, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, if you want to be able to put that time into it, know something that you want to do, and then like you're saying, go find someone that has the track record, put a little bit of research into finding the right person. And the right person is most likely going to be different for different people, right? I mean, your different outcome, all that's going to be different for different people. And then invest into yourself.
100%. And that's like, hit it out of the park. Like that's the same answer that I give people when they're like, all right, Mitch, like you got, and it's interesting. I'll have people that are twice my age still ask me for financial advice because like they heard me speak on stage or whatever. But that investment in yourself is if you have to ask the question, what should I invest in? Automatic answer is you. Invest in yourself, invest in your education, because if you have to ask someone else that question, then you don't know enough to wisely invest your money. And every time I've invested in myself through, a good coach or a mentor, and sure, there's been some where I didn't do enough due diligence and research. And I was like, oh, well, that $1,000 went down the tube or like whatever. But like when I've invested in the right mentors, the right coaches, the right programs, every single time, the type of returns, I was adding it up to somebody recently. There's this younger kid who was like 19 who was asking me, hey, like, what should I invest in?
This younger kid, dude, we're getting old, man. This younger kid that's 19. Sorry, go ahead.
But this kid, in like, what should I invest in? And I'm like, well, when I've invested in myself, and I outlined like one investment, and I'm like, I made a 500% ROI on this investment that I had in myself. This one was a 400% ROI. And he was just like, oh my, I'm like, yeah, beat that stock market. Like that investment in yourself of learning how to create wealth, how to get rich, how to make more money. Like that's the best investment that you could do. But when people take the approach of they're going to like lean back and just like throw their money at something, that's like, I went through. So one of the other things that I try to be transparent and forward about is like, I had a bankruptcy that I went through because I invested in some businesses, had some business partners where I just thought if I threw money at it, that like, oh yeah, like that'll be cool. And like, that's not a wise choice, but that's a conversation for another day of like, you can't just throw money at something that you don't understand. And that's advice that people far more successful than I am will give that same sort of advice. I think of dude's a billionaire up in Ogden. What's his name? Can't think of his name right now, but that was one of his biggest takeaways as well, is that he's like, don't invest in what you don't understand.
See, that's actually funny. That's how the Safe Store started. It was a buddy that brought the idea to me. I told him to do it, like talking about it's cool, but like get going, do it. What do you need help with? What can I help you with? And it was like, oh, I've never started an LLC. Well, dude, I can set up an LLC for you in 10 minutes, or you can go get a lawyer and, make sure everything's set, but I can get you one. And then that conversation went from, I don't know how to start a business or really set up all the back end insurance, get a lease, all that stuff. And then it went to, well, I don't really have the money either. And then, but I could run it. And so that's how that all started, was I was just helping them set, and it was just like a homie hookup thing. Like I didn't even want anything for it. I was like, let me set up all the back stuff for you. Let me get you a place. I personally guaranteed the lease. I fronted all the money. And then I was like, yeah, dude, we'll get this thing running. We'll get it profitable, and then just buy me out, like for what I'm into it. We'll figure it out down the road. And then it took about 7 months, and he wanted out. So I ended up with a Safe Store, right? And so I actually ended up shutting it down. I shut the storefront down, I moved everything into my brother's storage unit. He had a big storage unit, and I was selling safes out of the storage unit for, I don't know, maybe 9 months, 6 months. I don't remember how long it was. And then I was like, I had one of my other businesses that was taking a lot of my time. I'd ended up hiring it out, knowing I wanted to get back into the Safe Store game. And then I got it hired out. We ended up getting a space. COVID hit, and we opened a store, and it seems that when there's a lot of fear around, people want to buy safes to put their stuff in it. So it ended up working out. I mean, I didn't create COVID, but it definitely helped me.
Yeah, it didn't hurt your feelings. That's funny.
All right, so my main man, Mitch, over here wants to write a book. Tell me what you want to write a book about and where that thought came from. Because I'm not a writer. Mm-hmm. English, like my senior year, I really dove in with school. I ditched a lot of school in 10th grade. But dude, no matter what I did, I could not pull anything higher than a C in English class. I just don't like reading. I don't like writing. But it's been like a thought in the back of my head to write a book, but I'd have to like record it and then have someone else write it, which I understand now that people do. Yeah, I never thought of that.
A lot of best-selling authors do that.
But tell me about a book. Where'd that come from, and what would you want to write about?
I think that one of the biggest opportunities for like the rising generation, people who are, getting started in their careers, is entrepreneurship. And what I mean by entrepreneurship is people who come into an existing business, an existing organization, think about it, treat it as if it was their own business, as if they were the business owner of their department or of whatever they're in charge of. Even if you're a, one-man band, like you're the dude who sweeps the floors or like whatever, like if you start thinking about that like a business, I know so many people who they took a job like that of like being, the person who sweeps the floors, and then they literally create systems, and then they do create a business, and they go to their employer and be like, hey, I'm going to create a service. I'll still keep doing everything that I'm doing for like that same wage. But I've got this whole system and I figured out this thing, and they create a business, and then they go and get another client, and they get another client, and they get another client, and they get another client. Right. And that could be a form that's more of like entrepreneurship, but like intrapreneurship done right is when you partner with a business owner who is willing to grow and expand beyond being the like solopreneur. Most businesses stay small because the entrepreneur, the person who started it, isn't willing to let go of control, isn't willing to step out of the role of being everything to everyone and doing all of this stuff just because that's how it's always been.
That's my life, man. So you're preaching to the choir over here.
And so if you can find people who are hungry, who want to, grow a business, I think that's such a huge opportunity, because think about how many small businesses there are, especially in the United States, where, whether it's like a dry cleaner or, some mom and pop sort of shop, to where if they had an employee who like came in and said, hey, can I take this off your plate? Like, what would that be worth it to you? And then they just continue to like create value in the organization over time. They're going to become, I've got a team member who says this all the time, and I freaking love it. Is they're going to become undeniable, that like, you just can't argue with the fact they're creating so much value in the organization that they deserve more responsibility, that they are like going to be a good steward of resources. And when entrepreneurs are willing to share the upside, share the profits, do profit sharing, we call them performance bonuses, where I work, that when entrepreneurs are willing to do that, to be able to grow the pie, when entrepreneurs think about it of like, oh no, I'm going to have to like give this piece of the pie. It's like, what if the pie was twice as big because you were willing to share the upside with it? That's where I see a huge wave of opportunity. And so intrapreneurship, I think, is this like untapped market. And you think about somebody like Gary Vee, right? And he's, dude who's publishes prolific amounts of content. Is Gary Vee an entrepreneur? Absolutely. But Gary Vee started as an intrapreneur. He started in his parents' wine business, and he took that to the next level, and that gave him the capital and all the stuff to where eventually I'm sure he bought out his parents. I don't know all of Gary Vee's story, but like he started that out as an intrapreneur and grew that business. And so think about how many small businesses there are in the United States that if you were to partner with, if somebody were to say, hey, I'm interested in a pest control business, instead of just like knowing jack squat about it and saying, all right, I'm going to go start pest control, go work for one, create tons of value. And if there is an opportunity to be able to grow that existing organization, then great, do it. And then if not, you can always learn enough to go start your own thing, right? So I see it as a great pathway that I think has gotten lost with the collegiate approach. Like back in the day, people used to be apprentices. And like, what type of industries nowadays can you actually be an apprentice? There's very few. Like you think about it in the medical profession, that's about the only industry where you can actually be an apprentice anymore, right? That's why they call it residency. Mm-hmm. Like you've got to put in the time, and you got to spend time with the dude who's like the master, right? You got to spend time with the expert, the doctor, right? And then you can go on and become a doctor. But like this, the what used to be very common of being an apprentice to a blacksmith or whatever, that's just like faded away. And so I think that being an entrepreneur is like a form of apprenticeship that is just super powerful. So,
yeah. And I want to talk about some comments that you had gotten with what you were doing, transitioning into what you're doing now. But I think that I'm going to kind of lead us into that. I've talked about it before on here that it's the cool thing to be an entrepreneur. It's the sexy thing to be an entrepreneur. I make my own schedule. I do what I want. I did, and it's just not the case. And so what's sold out there in society is not what it is. And it's hard, but I think what cripples people is when and a lot of people aren't built to be an entrepreneur, just being honest, they're just not.
Yeah.
But there are people that are built for it. And if you can take those talents and team it with someone else that's built for it and maybe done it, the apprenticeship idea, you can take that person and plug them in. And now, like you're saying, now it's just blowing up what that idea can do. Because typically, in my experience, the original entrepreneur, that's the dreamer, that's the one that's projecting out 10 years from now. That's how many different ways can you say this? The 3,000 foot view, that's your whatever, right?
Visionary. Yeah.
Yeah. That's that guy. Well, having all of that go, and you had said this, I'm stealing this from you, but like going from that to hitting the pavement, like that's two completely different things. And it's hard to have the same person that does that. And I know I do it every day. And I'm not good at it. I'm admitting that. Like if I had someone come in at the safe store and took that role that you're taking, I mean, I think I'd be nervous to see how fast we'd outgrow the safe store, you know? But yeah, so talk a little bit about that, where there's I'm trying to say, like, if you're that person and you want to get plugged into a business that already exists because you know your talents will blow that business up, it's not giving up. It's not quitting. It's being able to see the bigger picture as an entrepreneur, that if you plug yourself in, you're going places.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when I transitioned from financial services to what I do now, it was interesting because I had people who knew that I owned my own business. And for me, it was like I got to this point, and you mentioned something similar, to where that's where I first hit six figures. And like, I thought that like the heavens were going to part, and that there was going to it was going to be this amazing thing because everybody talks about six figures. And like, I got to that point of success, which it's a great mile marker of success. But I was like, is this it? Like, is this all there is? And I got to a point where I realized that I only had maybe 5 or 6 clients that I was truly passionate about working with. And the rest of my client base, I had brought them in, I was providing a valuable service, but it didn't light me up anymore. And so that was part of my exodus into what I do now. But when I made that transition, I had people reaching out to me. A lot of them were there. They were W-2 employees who had dabbled in, entrepreneurship. Maybe they had a side gig or something. And I literally had people like reach out and be like, oh, so you couldn't hack entrepreneurship? Like,
not as easy as you thought, huh?
Like, and I was like, first off, like, why in the crap are you even like messaging somebody and saying that? Like, it's kind of a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
But like, I think that it spurs into that idea of that if you're not an entrepreneur, or if you've been an entrepreneur and you go do something else, then you're less than, right? And I think like right now, there are very few people that I could actually work for. And I was able to partner with my mentor and do what we're doing now. That's super meaningful and very much in alignment with what I believe my life purpose to be. But not everyone's willing to let go of certain aspects of control to be able to make that happen. And so it can be a tricky thing, but yeah, you're spot on that people will come out of the woodwork and be like, couldn't hack entrepreneurship. Right. And it's like, I am a better intrapreneur, I believe, than I am an entrepreneur, but I can partner with an entrepreneur and help run their organization, run their team, run the business, and, help them be in their lane and I in my lane. And like, that's one thing I'm good at. Yeah.
Well, and I like what you said, where you think, that's where you're supposed to be, because everything that you had been up to and everything you had gone through, the jobs you had gets you to that entrepreneurship, gets you to that 6 figures. But ultimately that leads you into working with your mentor and again, like blowing up that whole thing. And so, I mean, I think that's important because people, again, like I tie a lot of stuff on the podcast back to like a mental health base, because I think that's just a hot topic nowadays. But when people come off of that high of being an entrepreneur and doing 6 figures, and then when they go back, I don't even want to say like, I don't feel like you're working like you. I don't feel like you're working for someone. Like you have a task that you are completing. I mean, you're building something as well. You're helping him build something. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I guess that's why it's called an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur, right? But I don't want to make it sound like, because you're not a 9-to-5 guy in my mind, right? You're just helping him build his vision bigger.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, absolutely.
When do we push 6 figures to something else? Because I felt like growing up, like if your parents did 6 figures, dude, you were set. And then like we had made our first 6 figures when I was like mid-20s, mm-hmm. and my parents did it when they were 40. You know what I mean? So like when does that, is it 200,000? Is it 500,000? What do we push 6 figures to? Like if my kid makes 6 figures when he's 20, I'm going to be like, bro, Like, it's cool if you're the fry guy at McDonald's. You better be the best one, but we should probably get you making a little more money.
Totally.
Right. And so it's like wealth and wealthy, and it's all, depending on who you talk to, it's all perspective, right? Like, oh, dude, you're rich. Well, what's rich to you? You know, like if someone came to Amanda and I and said, you guys are rich, people come to Amanda and I and say, you guys are rich. And I just say, well, what's rich to you? Like in my standards right now, like we still live paycheck to paycheck because we have so much money out there trying to grow more money. And so I'm like, well, what's rich to you? Like, sure, I could shut down some of the new things we're getting into every month, and then I would have more money in our bank account, right? You know, is that 500? Is that $1 million? Like, I think you become, and we talked about this on the last podcast, you become like desensitized to those numbers. Like I joined Rolling Bones. Like we were talking about that before. We've had Brandon Armstrong on here, who is like a consultant with them. And then we had Brandon Neal on here, who's one of the partners. And I'm looking at these hunts, and like, it's something I really want to get into, you know, as my life goes a little further, as I free up more time and have more capital to spend on it. Right. But like hiking out in the mountains for 4 months and trying to scope out animals, like that doesn't necessarily, you know, entice me. But being able to pay someone to do that part, but still go have like a 5-day hunting camp and hopefully come home with an animal, like that sounds fun to me. So I'm looking at these hunts, and well, like for example, there's one that's I believe it was British Columbia. It was a moose and a bison, like both trophy animals. It's normally $30,000, and that's like, it's 10 days. It's they provide like your housing, they provide your food, they scout it, you know, it's a one-on-one guided hunt. Like $30,000? No, dude, I'm not going to spend $30,000 on that. But they just cut it to $15,000, and because they haven't filled it, I assume, and it's next week is when it starts. And so I'm looking at it, and Brandon Armstrong sent it to me. He's like, hey, if you know anyone that'd be interested in this, you know, send them this link. And I got looking at it, and I thought, man, like, I was hoping that this was the year I was going to get to that point where I could be like, cool, hey guys, I'm gone for 2 weeks. I'm going to go shoot some animals, you know, have everything hired out and everything taken care of. And I haven't gotten to that point with the store yet. So that's kind of what's holding me back. But when I looked at the number of, so they cut it to $15,000, I was telling my brother and my mom, like, yeah, it's only $15,000. You can go get like 2 trophy animals. Like, it's a once in a lifetime thing for $15,000. And they're just like gawking at me, like, you would seriously spend $15,000 on that? And I'm like, wouldn't you? You know? And so it's like, it's all a perspective thing, right? And like, there's another one that's an elk hunt for $4,000 in Idaho. I'm like, $4,000, and they house me and feed me, and they pack the animal out and all that. I'm like, I'm down. Like, sign me up. I might do that one next year. And my brother's like, you'd pay someone $4,000? And I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't. And so you become like desensitized to all these numbers, right? And I don't think, and I may be, I mean, the world of Facebook will correct me anyway, but I personally don't think making 6 figures is that hard, right? I mean, am I wrong for saying that?
Well, I think that
in a household, I should say a household, if you're having 2 working people.
If you have 2 working people and you're halfway decent at something, then you should be able to do that. Like here in Southern Utah, it's actually one of the lowest in terms of cost per living. It's one of the like most difficult places to make it because there is a ton of like low wage type of jobs. There's not a lot of high paying jobs. We don't have an industry like in manufacturing or in tech. Now there's cool stuff that's coming here that'll, shift the economic landscape. But yeah, outside of the Southern Utah bubble, I think that is pretty reasonable for like dual income household to be able to make 6 figures. And like you were talking about with your parents back in the day, like took them a long time to get to that point. Like 6 figures back then was very different than 6 figures now because of just like you look at inflation and like cost of living and all that stuff now. Like you need to, like if you're not making 6 figures, like you're screwed.
Yeah.
Like you're
like
living,
if you have kids and a
poverty.
house and cars and
yeah.
how are you not making it?
Yeah. So like, I feel like, multiple six figures is the pathway. That's where people need to get to really be middle class anymore. And, seven figures is rich, right? Whereas I think that, you go back to 1980, and if you were making six figures, you probably had a BMW in your driveway and you had a, 4,000 or 5,000 square foot house. Like, you're doing all right.
And a nice boat. And yeah.
But also, like, wages have stagnated since like 1970. And so it can be a hard thing. But that's why I believe so strongly in, entrepreneurship, like either owning or running a business or being part of a business where you can participate in profit upside. Like, that's the path. Like, that's how you are able to get rich. So if you don't have the opportunity for profit upside, maybe you're at a decent paying job, then what are you going to do as your side hustle to be able to create that income? And there's so much opportunity in that. Like, yeah,
there's so much money out there. There's so much money out there to be made. And I mean, I guess that was my thought going into it. So I worked for the for the actual post office. Now I own contracts from the post office. But I worked for the post office. Yeah. It is. Some days it's not, but most of the time it is. So I worked for the post office, and everyone was like, dude, you made it. Like, you're at the post office, you're going to retire a millionaire, all this stuff. And I've told the story on here before where I finally got hired on, and I did it fairly quick because of the growth in Hurricane, Utah. I made regular, like, fairly quick. Nothing I did. It was just the growth was needing more people. Even when I sat down with the postmaster to sign all my papers to be full time, it was like, I believe he sat there, and I'm pretty sure it was 32. He's like, congratulations, man. In 32 years, you're going to retire. And I was just like, dude, I don't think this is for me. After, like, when I was like, cool, we're high-fiving and everything. And then I left, and I just got thinking, like, I don't think that this is where I'm going to end up. Like, I don't think I can do it. One, I don't think I could mentally do it for 32 years.
I know.
And so but everyone was like, man, that's such a good gig. My grandpa did that. My uncle did that. Everyone knows. I mean, it's the largest civil workforce in the nation. So everyone knows someone that's worked there. And for me, when I found out that the guys that have been there for as long as I've been alive aren't clearing six figures, and they're doing, I think at the time it was like high 60s. The postmaster's doing like 60. I was like, dude, I don't think this is a place for me. And I had a number of people that had retired that I delivered to, and they were like, dude, just stay in it, keep contributing to your 401k, keep contributing to the the different savings plans that they had set up. And like, one guy had this huge house, had RV, razors, and he's like, dude, just stay with it and you're going to retire rich, man. And I'm like, yeah, dude, but you're 80. Like, you already retired and made all that money. Like, it's going to be a different landscape when I'm 30 years from now.
Well, that's the thing. So, the rules of the game have changed, right? And part of the reason why I like to throw rocks at 401ks is that you look at the tax environment that 401ks were born into. 401ks are just the traditional investment vehicles that most people do, like I'm not talking about a Roth IRA, but like 401ks, IRAs. Those were born in a tax environment that it was historically some of the highest tax rates that ever existed. And so when you think about that, like when you're at this historical high tax rate, you're of course going to want to kick the can down the road for paying your taxes later, because if they're freaking high, there's nowhere for them to go but down, right? And so that's the birth of the 401k was, hey, let's defer tax till a later date, and hopefully we're going to, be okay. But now, historically, like, everyone complains and grumbles about taxes. I do too. And I'm, always, working with my accountant to figure out how I can, only pay exactly as much as I absolutely have to pay, right? But like, historically, we're actually at a low point in taxes. You look at some of the highest points, and your top income earners, like back in the day, David McKnight talks about this in his book, The Power of Zero. He talks about Ronald Reagan as an example, who Ronald Reagan was a 7-figure earner, as an actor. Dude was paying like 96% in taxes, 94, I think it was 94% in taxes, right? So in that sort of an environment, of course you're going to want to defer tax. But now when we're looking at, high 30s, if you're a top income earner, like that's nothing close to 97.
Right.
But when people are using the same vehicle, taxes were up here, now taxes are here, but people are using the same vehicle from the 70s, that was first, I think it was in the 70s when 401ks were first introduced. It's been a hot minute since I've done a webinar on this topic, so I don't remember my dates exactly. But like the rules of the game have changed. And so when we have the generation before us saying like, oh, just do this, it's because it worked for them. But like,
exactly.
It's not the same game anymore. Like that's like if I've only ever played football, which I should probably say basketball because I did play basketball. But like I've only played basketball. I've never played football. I shouldn't be coaching you in football by basketball's rules.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. And that was when I'm talking to that guy, I'm like, yeah, you're already done and made your money. We're talking a different game here. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. If if you're 9 to 5 and you want to spend your time and days off fishing and hiking and don't want to worry about any of that, dude, maybe put some in the 401k, put some in your Roth IRA. I mean, like Amanda, we had loaded up all 3 of them. So we have distributions going to all of them. And so like, I'm still doing that. So I can't say you're crazy if you do it, but we also have we have 3 times as many things going on over here trying to build that as well.
Totally. If getting rich is not like somebody's jam, like if they're like, I don't care about that. Like I've got family members who they're just like, I don't care about the money, and that like, that's just, it's not what drives them. Like that's okay. One thing that I love that Tony Robbins talks about is that like your blueprint for life, like a recipe for being frustrated and not being satisfied in your life is to have an expectation that like you're doing this, but the expectation is this. And so if you are living out of alignment, like expect to have a frustrated life where you're not satisfied and fulfilled. And so if your blueprint for life is like, hey, I just need to make enough money to cover my bases and like stuff like that, and I want to have all of this free time, awesome. That's super, super cool. Like you do you, and I'm sure that somewhere in the wash, things are going to work out and you're going to be able to find a way to make things happen. And so I think that when you follow that, pursue the passion, then I think that can work out well. But if there's something inside of you that's like, I feel called to produce, to create, to do something, then I think that the ultimate dissatisfaction of life would be to ignore that call and like not live into the potential of what you could have been. And so like, just be real, raw and honest with yourself. Because I think that a lot of times we get these ideas projected upon us that we think we should care about something that we don't actually care about. And I think that's BS. But anyway, so that's one thought on the matter, is that it doesn't have to be, I don't know. I think about making money in the sense of like, can you align your interest? Can you align your passion? Can you align your purpose with something that you can make money at? And like Derek's somebody who like, dude likes hunting, dude likes safes, like dude, like you found something that you can make money in, that you have some natural passion for. And, you had a business partner at the ship that didn't pan out, and they helped you make that decision to where like, help make that bet of, making that a core part of your business. And I think that when people can align their business with their passion, then I think that's a huge thing. So that's kind of like what I do. So I'm on the corporate side of the MLM world, and growing up in Utah, I'd been, it's like the MLM mecca of the world, right? There's so many MLM companies that are based out of Utah, and I had a bad taste in my mouth around, the whole network marketing thing, because when I was, early 20s was the first time that I discovered the industry. And I had somebody from one of my college classes that was like, hey, you should talk to, this guy that's really successful who, introduced me to this business opportunity. And I'm like, hook, line, and sinker. I'm like, heck yeah. Like I'm a business student, going to college. And I was like, sweet, this guy wants to talk to me. Let's talk. And I started to see the beauty of this industry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, do people not know about this? Like, is this like, holy crap, like these people are like coming in and they're like making money, and like this business model is crazy. But then I started talking to my family and friends, and I had this like shut up, do not talk to me about that.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not always the response, but we've got people like John Oliver who did that whole like big, I don't know if you've seen that video where he's the British, Colin, the right guy. He's like the British, like late night talk show host guy. Like he did this big like expose on MLMs. And then there's been the Amazon documentary about the leggings company and stuff like that. And there is bad actors in any industry, right? But what I've found is that people don't actually have an issue with the business model. They have an issue with how the business model has been executed. Because when you actually study the business model, if you're part of a door-to-door sales team, you're in a MLM direct sales company. Like that's the business model.
Right.
If you're a real estate agent, guess what? You're in an MLM. Like your broker gets override commissions for the stuff that you sell, and like you're in an MLM. Like you can look at these industries that are just like common staples. And what my big ambitious goal is to not just like change the industry with the company that I'm with, but to change the identity, to change the perception of MLM. And when I was first introduced to it, I didn't have the skill set, the influence, the ability to be able to do anything about that. And so I just kind of like signed it off and said, screw this industry. I'm done. I'm out. Like I'm never again going to do this, because my upline pissed off some of my valued relationships, and people still won't talk to me to this day because my upline was an idiot and didn't know how to approach the business professionally and made people feel stupid for not joining the business. And so I swore it off. But as fate would have it, a decade later, my mentor's like, hey, let's start a direct sales company. I'm like, oh.
I want to have friends though.
Yeah. And I'm like, can we please just like not do it the way that other people have done it? Like, can we just do it differently? Can we do it right? And he's like, well, yeah, like, why would we do it the bait and switch way of like, hey, come over to my house for a party? It's not really a party. I'm going to pitch you my business. Like, he's like, why would we do that? And I'm like, okay, like, cool. Then I'm in. Like, let's see what we can build. Let's see what we can create. And it's been so fun to be able to create a company that's centered around like culture of like doing it right. Like, let's take something good. Let's disrupt the industry. We don't have to do it the way that, the old school type of approaches. Let's bring some new school methodology. And it's super fun to be able to, work on disrupting the industry and being able to make changes there. And so, I don't know, it's a cool thing. I enjoy it a lot. It creates a path for the everyday person to be able to create financial freedom and be able to create residual income when it's done right. And there's plenty of companies out there that do it wrong, but we're focusing on doing it right. So.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of the same route. I had a bad taste when I was younger. My dad got sucked into a lot of them, spent a lot of money buying products, buying stuff. He's like me. He was a relationship guy. He had a lot of relationships, and it just never panned out for him because it was always the get rich quick thing in his mind, and so I'd always kind of swore it off. And then when I met Brandon Neal, who did Prime America, and some of his partners in Rolling Bones now are Prime America, Jeff Fieldstead was, it's kind of like, it made me look at it in a different light, And then when I mentioned Rolling Bones and the hunting stuff, it's an MLM. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And so even when Brandon Armstrong was talking to me about Rolling Bones, and when he mentioned it was MLM, I was like, yeah, dude, I'm not really into that. And then it was probably 9 or 10 months later, I'd met Brandon Neal and then Jeff Fieldstead. And it kind of just, it was more like you were saying, like I was closed off to it. Mm-hmm. Like I had that one experience, shut it down. Didn't even want to talk about it anymore. And then when I could open my eyes up to it, be like, oh, there's a lot of cool features in this business plan or this, how they lay it out. And if it's done right, like you said, that's where it comes from. But yeah, dude, I've had the bait and switch a few times with, hey, dude, we're having pizza at our house. And then there's like some random dude there. And I'm like, what's this guy about? Oh, this is my manager. He's going to talk to us about this thing. And and at the time, like my friends don't even know what it is. Like my friend that's pitching it doesn't even understand it,
And I think that that's part of the problem is that the industry has their primary acquisition method for customers is churn and burn, meaning I recruit you, I get you to, open up your network, your Rolodex, so to speak, and then I churn through your, network of people. I maybe get, 3 to 5 good people from your 150. I take those, whether you survive in the business or not. I don't really care because I got 3 to 5 people. Like the industry has relied on that type of a method. And dude, like that makes my blood boil. Like we had one of our distributors early on who was doing that. And I was like, hey, how's this person doing on your team? And he's like, she kind of phased out, but doesn't matter because I got what I needed from her. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I got like the 3 to 5 people from her. I'm like, bro, like let's just lay this out on the table. Like that's not okay in our culture. You can go do that in another company, but like that's not happening here. And so you can choose to change, or you can like pack up and ship out, sort of a thing. And this was a guy that I was close with, I even call him a friend. But I was like, that's just not okay. But it's that kind of mentality that I think just puts a sour taste in everybody's mouth. But the industry has been okay with it. There hasn't been people on the corporate side who are actually willing to be like, no, that's not cool. I think that in a lot of ways, the corporate side of MLM has just been like, all right, I'm just going to like kind of close my eyes to some of the crappy stuff that goes on and allow it to happen. And like, I'm not cool with that. Like that's something that I'm willing to throw rocks at. But the industry itself, like I said before, is when it's executed right, it's a beautiful thing. But most people have an issue with it because it hasn't been executed right. And the barrier to entry to get into the industry is so freaking low. Somebody with, a couple $100 can, pay to join. And then they think their next thing is going to be like, well, what's the next private island that I'm going to buy? Right. I just need to get 3 friends who get 3 friends who get 3 friends. And like, everything, all my problems are solved. Like, it's just, that's the way that they've kind of sold the dream is inaccurate. But if you approach it using business best practices, if you approach it in a professional manner, like you said, these dudes who are like another person's name that I'll throw into the ring, who's been like a key contributor here in Southern Utah, is Monty Holm. Have a ton of respect for Monty. I got to do some business transactions with him when I was in the car business, and the most amazing guy in the world. Dude's a philanthropist, contributor. I remember growing up, like our church youth group needed to go somewhere, and I'm remembering it wrong, but like Monty was like we're trying to figure out how to get all these youth like on a youth trip or something. And he just like bought a bus for the church youth group to like be able to go on the trip or whatever. I'm like, man, that's like so cool. But like, there's been a ton of wealth and fortune that's been created in the industry when it's done right, with legends like Monty and some of the dudes that you've been talking about.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap this up, is, and I should have inserted this earlier, so I'm going to kind of circle back to the little things we were talking about wealth and why it's our obligation to be able to do it. I did have a conversation or it wasn't a conversation, it was like a message back and forth of a guy saying, why would it be like because I had a clip that went like semi-viral about it's your obligation to gain wealth and to produce wealth for multiple reasons. I tied it to generations. But I could go on and on about how many reasons there could be. And they said, well, like, oh, what if I don't have any kids, and why would I need to be wealthy? And so when you brought that up, it kind of made me think of this again. And he even said like, well, I volunteer, I do this. And I'm like, hey, so you're telling me you volunteer, say you're going to like a homeless shelter, you're volunteering, and you're doing your 3 hours and you feel good about it. That's great. Not knocking that. But what if you were wealthy? What if you did things to become wealthy and you didn't have anything else to, anybody to pass it on to? You didn't have anything. What if you built 3 homeless shelters? What if you could donate money to buy food for that homeless shelter? What if, so I laid out all these different things, and I'm like, so this is why it's your obligation. Sure, 3 hours to go help, that's great. Not knocking it. I've never done it. There's people that don't do it. But what if you could, even just donate $100? What if you could find someone homeless on the side of the road and buy them dinner, what I'm saying? So I'm like, yeah, so there are levels to it, but there are reasons why it is your obligation, especially if you live in the United States, to, that's a whole nother podcast, but just the benefits and the different opportunities that we have to live in the United States to become wealthy you can't compare it to any other country, I don't think, but
yeah, you really can't. It's well, I love that you brought up like somebody doesn't have kids, right? And they're like, why should I even pursue that? Is like, I love to have the conversation around, are you a consumer or are you a producer? And like, that is an identity shift. When I became a producer, when I became someone who was like, I am going to create value in the marketplace, dude, I wasn't planning on going here, but let's go here. I was a suicidal teen. I know that like you've experienced suicide in your family. Between after graduating high school and before I left, I chose to serve a service mission for my church. That year was hellacious for me. I about put a gun in my mouth and ended my life. Because like all my friends were leaving, I was only sleeping like 3 hours a night. My diet was crap. Like I just like all of this stuff kind of like welled up, and I was super depressed, and I was trying to consume my way to getting happy. At the time I was really into like music and concerts and punk rock and the ska scene and stuff. And so I was like, oh, the next concert or the next show, like that's going to be the thing where I'm going to be healthy or happy. That's going to be the thing where, I'll finally feel it like, and I was fortunate enough. And I believe that it's, God's grace that I had people in my life who, showed me that I did have value, that I was, that I could like, because the pattern that I was running, the story that I was telling is I'm a burden to other people. And when I finally got clear about that and, went to go serve a mission and stuff like that, my habits shifted. I started getting into healthy habits, started focusing on not just me and the stuff. And I'm not saying that like, just exercise and your mental health is going to be okay. Just eat right and your mental health is going to be okay. Like I had a straight up mental breakdown like 2 months ago. But like, the story that we tell ourselves, our fundamental belief about who we are, at that time, I wasn't producing much in the way of value in my life. And as I was able, I believe very much through the grace of God, to be able to get out of that dark place, what I saw was that there was people that I could help. And I believe that God placed people in my life, in my path, that I could, because I had been to that dark place, I can look somebody right in the eye who's ready to like end their life and be like, you matter and you have worth. There's people on my mission that I got to be able to help save from suicide who were in that sort of situation. And I believe that when we start to shift into producing value for other people, like that's why we're put on God's green earth to do what we do. And that's why I love what you're doing with this podcast, and you're not afraid to talk about mental health, and you're not afraid to talk about some of these things. Like that's the shift from being a consumer of like, let me just consume all of this. Like you're going to find yourself at some point in your life where you can't consume anymore to be happy. You've got to get out and produce. And that's going to be the thing that provides value. So using your example of the homeless shelter, yeah, make a bunch of money so that you can donate to the cause that you care about. Make a bunch of money so that you can leave the world a better place than what it was, because there's plenty of screwed up people in this world who are tearing the world down. Be a builder, be a producer, be somebody who is making a difference with your life. And for me, when I stop viewing myself as I'm a burden to other people and I'm a blessing or I'm an asset or I'm someone who can contribute to people, man, that's when my life shifted. And so, as you can tell, I'm a little bit passionate about that.
I love it, dude. I love it.
That it's a conversation of producing value and how you view yourself, how you view the world, and do you want to make it a better place or do you want to just consume and die?
I like it. Thanks for sharing it. When I jump on here, you just briefly mentioned 2 months ago you were struggling, and so I'll talk about it a little bit on here. We've been, 65 episodes straight every week. We had an episode come out, and some of those, like this one. So we did one earlier this week that's going to go. So what's today? Friday.
Yeah.
So we'll have one earlier this week that's going to be posted tomorrow. Mm-hmm. This podcast will be posted the next week. So we stacked up on the same week because I'm gone next week, and so that's why we did that. So. Like, sure, there were some times we planned ahead and, got an episode ahead. So we had that fluctuation. But regardless, we had 65 weeks straight of having a podcast come out. I'm not sure that I've done anything other than like shower and brush my teeth for 65 straight weeks. Right. And so So, I mean, it was a big thing for me. It was a big thing for Mallory when we went a full year every week. And then 2 weeks ago, I have had a lot of pressure on me, right? We just closed on that house, or escrow hasn't closed. We signed everything yesterday, and it's in California, so it's 5 hours from here. The retail stores, I have a kid that helps me. He's in high school, Abe. I've talked about him on here before. But he's in high school. He's a senior this year, and he's doing football. He's a starting center for Snow Canyon, and love the kid to death. I wish I could have him 8 hours a day, And so right now he's Saturdays, and that's it, because he goes to high school and then he has football practice right after. And so it's just my mom's been my savior at the store, because she helps run the resale business, which we run out of that same store, and we have storage units behind the store where we store everything. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I had a customer with our safe store that I've had not like issues, but I installed a vault door for him 2 years ago. I won't go into all the, details, but over the last 2 years, he's called us 4 times, and he's very abrasive and, accusing us of different things that we did wrong, and every time I've been able to talk to him, smooth it over, make it right, so he feels good about it, and we go down the road. And then, 8-9 months later, he'll call us again, some issue. And so I had a vault door install for someone else. It ended up breaking our equipment trying to get this door into the house, and it pushed everything else. So I do deliveries in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I've also had people be like, this dude only works noon to 6. He can't have that hard of a life. And I'm like, well, that's because we're doing deliveries from 6 to noon, And so we do deliveries or safe moves almost every morning, or I'm lined up at a different business, or I'm lined up doing something else. So it ended up pushing my whole day 3 hours later, because that vault door delivery took longer. Well, this guy's calling and texting me 6 or 7 different times. And so I finally call him. He's yelling at me about something. And I said, hey man, I'm doing everything I can. I'll try and get out there tomorrow. I don't know if I'll have time. I had to push everything from today to tomorrow. So I'll do everything I can to get there. If not, it'll be Saturday. And he's like, well, I can't do it Saturday, so I'll see you Friday. And I'm like, well, dude, I'll do everything I can, but I can't promise anything. You're way out of the way. I have nothing on that side of town, but I'll go out there if I have time. And then the next day, first thing in the morning, so are you going to make it out here or not? I'm like, dude, I haven't even started anything yet. And I go do the couple jobs I had lined up, and my phone, when I'm with the customer, my phone's in my pocket, I just silence it. I don't look, I don't pull it out and look at it. Right. And so my phone had gone off a few times. I was silencing it. When I got done with my 2 deliveries and a safe move, I finally pulled my phone out and look at it. And this dude's called me. He's called the store. He's texted me. He's texted the store. And so I text him back. I'm like, hey man, I don't think I'm going to get out there today. And he sends me this text of personally attacking me. Right. And I had to go home to get one more thing before I went back to the store, to get some tools that I left at the house. And I went into the house and just broke down. Mentally, I was just shattered. And it wasn't even that guy, but that was the last straw. Right. Totally. And so we had a podcast that night that I was supposed to do for 2 weeks ago, or last week. And I text Mallory and I just said, hey, I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think I'm going to be there. And then I just shut my phone off, and my phone was off for the next 2 days. And my mom knew. She was running my retail business, so she knew. A couple friends had texted my wife, my phone's always on. It's always available. So a couple friends had texted my wife, hey, is Derek okay? Can't get a hold of him. Dude, and I spent a whole day in bed, just watching a TV show that I didn't even care about. And And it's funny because it's not funny, but my wife, like, she's very aware of who I am. I've talked about it on here before. My dad took his own life, right? And so it's something that she's like aware of, like it's in my genes. My dad's whole family, I mean, I'm not afraid to say that. To my knowledge, he has 8 siblings. All of them but one has attempted suicide.
Wow.
And so my wife's like aware of it, but I mean, you just never know. Like I've never had like a suicidal thought until recently. And it's because I'm on some medication for my back. And one of the side effects of it is, it's like part of what it's treated, not for me. Well, maybe it is. I don't take it for an antidepressant, but that's what it is treated for a different cause or a different reason. And I'd forgotten to take it one night. And that night I could feel myself just like kind of different. And I kind of just like shut down because I was like just getting angry, you know? And then that night I was like, couldn't go to bed. And I was just like having these thoughts, kind of like you were saying, where like maybe it'd just be easier if I wasn't around, you know? And then I was like, I should just go for a drive and like clear my head. And then I had thoughts of like driving and like turning into a wall or turning into another car or something. Right. And I'm like very self-aware of like, dude, this is weird. Yeah. You know, like I've never had thoughts like this before. And I'm not like, I was aware of it enough to be like, to kind of shake it off. But like, I don't know if I would have went and gotten a car. I don't know what would have happened. So the next morning I woke up, my wife was awake with our kid, and I just went out and told her like, dude, I'm fine. But I've just kind of had these weird, and this is 2 different times. This isn't when I shut my phone off. This was about a week or 2 before. Still under all that same pressure, just didn't have that guy yelling at me. Right. And so this is hard for me to talk about because I usually don't like, I'm aware of it on the podcast. We talk about it. But I haven't really like voiced it to anyone yet. So we're kind of just putting it out in the open. So anyway, I just went to my wife. This was weeks ago, and said, hey, I was having these weird thoughts. Like, could it have been those pills? She's a medical professional, right? So she's like, yeah, another reason that people take those is an antidepressant. And I was like, oh, like maybe I should not skip those anymore, you know, like, cause I've never felt like that. I've never had thoughts like that. And so now, you know, skip back to last week, my wife comes up to me and she's like, hey, like, I know you got a lot going on. I know you're under a lot of pressure. I just need to know, like, have you had any suicidal thoughts? And I was like, no, I don't want to harm myself. I just don't want to do anything. And so, and in my mind, I'm like, I guess I'm just depressed, you know? So yeah, dude, I kind of spent the weekend with my phone off, and it helped. It helped me kind of disconnect. The other thing that really helped me was my son. Sunday morning. So with my dad, I had times with my dad where when I lost a lot of respect for him is when he would go 4 or 5 days without getting out of bed. Mm-hmm. You know, I was paying bills at the time. My mom was working. We were doing everything, and he's like just laying in bed, and I didn't understand it. Right. Mm-hmm. Never been through anything like that. I've never seen anyone go anything like that. And so that Sunday morning when I woke up, my son was home and I could hear him outside. I like jumped up and ran out into the family room and started playing with him. And I think that's what really kind of helped me get out of it. So I don't know, maybe he'll listen to this in 15 years and know that something like that happened. But I had told myself that day that I'm not going to let him see me that way, even though I needed to disconnect for a little bit, you know? So, thanks, dude.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, everyone goes through it, dude. Like I said, I have people come up to, like, close friends, not just random people, like close friends are like, dude, you and Amanda are doing really good. Like, you're doing well. You guys are making a lot of money. You're doing this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it's hard, man. Like, I still go through things. Like, yeah, Amanda and I, like our relationships are really, really good, but we have a lot of stress with everything that's going on.
And that's, for me, as I've worked through some of those things, and like, thanks for sharing that. Like, I realize that other people are going to hear this story too. So my default response would be like, thanks for sharing that with me, but I know that you're sharing that with other people. But I think that that's part of the gift, man. Like, when you can call out the things that you are scared of, like when you can look your demons in the face, that's where power comes from. Where I feel like most people who end up like taking their life or who just shirk away from what they could have been, it's when they're running away from their demons. It's when they're running away from that. And there's a book that I don't agree with everything in the book, but it gave me this one idea that was so powerful. And it's called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert something. And he works exclusively, he's a therapist who works exclusively with men. And he talks about a lot of things that have helped improve my relationship with my wife and other people. But he talked about this underlying belief of, oh, well, if X happens, then I might not be able to handle it. I might not be able to do it. Like there's this undercurrent of like, I don't know if I could handle it if X happens. And for me, that was like bankruptcy. I'd had like perfect credit. And I went from like never missed a payment, perfect credit, had some business deals go sideways, bankruptcy, back to like perfect credit. But like for me, when I was going through that, I was like, oh no, like it felt like it was like I was like falling off of a cliff, and I was like, the ground is getting closer. And I was like, if that happens, then like I don't know what's gonna happen. And then like it was like I crashed through this like glass floor, and I was like, wait a second, like I'm still here, like I'm okay. But like that belief had held like my mind in a vice grip of like, if X happens, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to handle it. And so for me, when I've pushed myself harder than I should have, like when I had this mental breakdown a few months ago, I don't allow myself to stay there. I'm just kind of like, I take it, I disassociate to a level of like, like it's like I'm almost viewing Mitch from a third party perspective. I'm like, that guy is really stressed out. That guy is under a lot of pressure. And I'm like, maybe we should change something in his environment. Like maybe let's take some time off. Maybe let's do some things that I enjoy. Like let's see if we can relieve pressure somehow. But like, I don't allow myself to believe that like I'm not capable of that, because human beings, especially people like you, people like me, like we are resilient people. But when we can look the demons in the face and be like, you don't have power over me. Like I'm a producer, I'm a creator, I'm a like whatever resonates with you. I don't know. I think that there's something powerful about that. And so thanks for sharing that story, because I think just bringing it out into the light helps give permission, because so many people struggle with mental health and they're like, oh, I'm worried about what people are going to think of me if I talk about that. And when you can get rid of the shame and the stigma around it, like you'll find that I'm willing to bet that if this part of the podcast gets published, which I hope that it does, I'm willing to bet that you're going to get a flood of messages pouring in from people being like, thank you for saying something. Like, thank you for opening up about that. I have struggled with that too, because so many men feel like they have to just like be this stalwart person who never cracks and never breaks. And that was part of the thing that led me to this whole mental breakdown a little while ago, is I was like, I'm this dude that like never cracks, and like, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And then I freaking cracked, and I had this identity crisis, and I was like, this is not supposed to happen. I'm the guy who like has all the certainty for all the people. And I just needed the time. I needed to get around the right people. I needed to create a healing environment, a healing space. And like, I'm resilient. I'm back. Like Mitch is back. And so like, just because you crack, or just because you had something that happened to you, that's not your identity from there moving forward. It's just an event that you can move through, you can rebuild. And to me, that's empowering.
Yeah. I something that's helped me a lot, maybe the last 10 years, if you want to put a date to it. I've realized that these things that happen in your life, it's such a small amount of time. And even like call it a weekend, I shut my phone off for 2 days. Like I'm already over it. Like I'm already past it. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I'll just give an example. Like look back at high school, dating a girl breaks up with you. Worst thing that could ever happen. You're crying at night. You're listening to sad music, whatever you did to get over it. And then like now, how long we've been out of high school? 14?
Yeah. 14 going on 15 years.
Yeah.
I'm a senior class president. I'm supposed to like do the reunions, and I shirk that responsibility.
But like I look back and I'm like, it was such a small amount of time in my life. And it's just, and like the girls I dated in high school, I can't even, maybe they will. I can't even remember why we broke up. Like, I don't even know what the big deal was, but in the moment, like it's life shattering. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I'm in those moments, I try to, and I've done it. I've been able to stop and kind of look outside the box and be like, okay, dude, this sucks. Like, this is hard. In 5 years, I probably won't even remember this happened. You know what I mean? Like, as long as I keep pushing forward, this is going to be such a small thing. And it's even with like milestones that you hit, these little, like what stresses me out right now, the way that the trajectory of my life, what I'm stressing about right now, 5 years from now isn't even going to phase me. Mm-hmm. Right. But that's part of it. That's part of leveling up. You have to go through these things to be able to get to that next step to where you can look back and realize it wasn't that big of a deal. In the moment, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. Yeah. So,
well, I love that. And I think about it in terms of, we have these experiences, and they can either be a building experience or a breaking experience. And so, we get to ultimately choose whether is this going to be a building experience that's going to, I'm the hero in the story, and like, this was the thing that the triumph, the challenge that I had to triumph over and overcome, or are we going to let it break us? And like, if you get broken down for a little bit, that's okay. Like, heroes in every story get beat up, get knocked down, have to go back to fight the bad guy a second time. Like, that's okay. But like, when I view it in terms of breaking and building experiences, I think that's powerful. One last story that comes to mind is a few years ago, I'm actually leaving at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I've got a lot of packing to do, heading out for a family trip to California. But we usually go to California for a family trip about once a year with my wife's family. And we're hanging out on the beach. And my brother-in-law and we're going out boogie boarding. I'm not cool enough to surf. I tried that once and just was like washing machine. So we're boogie boarding, and we're like out there kind of waiting for this next wave. And I see there's this like kind of like 12-year-old kid who had been out swimming next to us. And I noticed that his head's starting to bob under the water. And I'm like the closest person. His parents, like I knew where his parents were on the beach, and they weren't aware that like the trouble that he's in. And so I was able to like paddle over and get close enough to like send my boogie board over to where he grabs the boogie board. And, then I go and swim over to the boogie board and start pulling him to shore. And by then his parents saw, and they, they're like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. And like, we're able to get this kid to shore safely. And, it like when I got back to the beach, I like went down and just like sat down and like, holy crap, like what just happened? Like that kid could have died, and he was like right there. And it seems so ironic to me, because like I'm sitting down on the beach and I see like those waves just about took that kid's life. But you look down the beach line a little further, and there's these people that are surfing, having a great time on top of the waves. And the epiphany that I had was that the wave was just a wave. It wasn't good. It wasn't bad. The wave was just a wave. And like, depending on our skill level is going to determine whether that wave could kill us or whether we could be surfing on that wave. And when I have the hard experiences hit me in life, I try to remember that lesson of like, a wave is just a wave. It is what it is. It's neither good nor bad. We get to determine what the outcome is going to be as we write our own story. So,
dude, that's probably the best clip out of this whole podcast. I love that. It illustrates it very well, because if you haven't gone through those levels and done those different things to get you to the next level, it's hard to explain to people. Mm-hmm. But that's great. I think we end it right there.
Good with that.
All right, guys. I hope you've stuck around long enough to hear the last story, because that was the bell cow of the whole thing. So, dude, I really appreciate you reaching out and coming on. I'm sorry we kept you a little late. We're running on 2 hours right now. So But again, dude, appreciate it. And also when we have people on that have reached out, I try to encourage people, hey, if you have a story, if you have something you want to, come on and talk about, and you think that the whole podcast was built on, you're not alone, there's other people going through the same thing you are. And if you have a story you think would help someone, then, reach out to us and we'll bring you on. And you can do that with just Derek Lake Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Just shoot us a message, and Mallory or I will respond to you, and we'll, get it lined up. So yeah, episode 67, my main man, Mitch Hancock, student class president. Is that what you said it was? I was thinking you were in some kind of government, but I couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah. The reason why, me and some of my friends were ditching one day, and we're like, hey, I bet we could get out of more class if we did student council. And sure enough. So that's what spurred that on.
All right, guys, if you're still here, appreciate you staying. Please like the episode, share the episode. We do a lot of clips, so follow us on all the social medias. We're actually gaining a lot of traction on YouTube with the new shorts. So subscribe on YouTube, like the shorts, interact with us, comment on here. A lot of the times when I'm laying in bed and I can't sleep for some reason, I like to read the negative comments on the podcast, but I like to get on there and interact with you. So if you have something to say or a comment on it, or you want to correct us on something we're wrong on, I'm fine with that too. Just throw a comment in and we'll try and get back with you. So anyway, guys, we'll be back 2 weeks from now, but we're going to have an episode the next couple Fridays or Saturdays till I get back in town. So episode 68 will be next. Appreciate you. We'll see you guys next week.